Welcome, welcome everyone. As you guys come in, just ensure that you are on mute. Like I said, welcome, welcome. If you guys want, definitely feel free to put on your cameras. It's great to see everybody. We do have a really big group. And just going through and just ensuring that everybody is muted and we don't have no hot mics. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nicolette Cobell. I currently serve as the Program Recruitment and Inclusion Manager here at PGI. And PGI's mission, we work with the National Park Service just to recruit candidates that are purpose-driven leaders and have a personal interest in using their skills and expertise to help America's national parks continue to thrive. Today, for our call, we do have two BPI alum from this past summer 2021, and you're just going to get to hear about their projects and how they were able to make an impact within their parks. And so before we actually dive into the content today, in PGI tradition, we actually do a moment of mindfulness. I know this is a crazy season for you all. It's recruitment season. It's the holiday season. We have family members who keep on nagging us and things of that nature. And so we do like to take a moment just to take a pause, which a lot of times we don't get to do. And so typically our moment of mindfulness are usually a meditation of some sorts, but actually today we're going to switch it on up. It is 5 o'clock Eastern time. And we're going to do a moment where you're just going to take a moment and just breathe for a second, and you can divert your eyes, ensure that your feet are planted on the ground. And I just want you to take a moment and think about how you conquered and are going to conquer this week. What is something that you're super proud of yourself that you have done thus far? Really just think about how you are able to conquer that one thing, whether that's an assignment, whether that is speaking up in a meeting, or it's the fact that you made your own coffee, whatever it is. I want you to think about that and kind of just hold it in your mind for a second and just take a moment to breathe. And just take one more breath. Awesome. Definitely feel free when you get the chance to come back to the group. And thank you for practicing a moment of mindfulness with me today. And so I do hope that you guys take that with you as you guys go into the next few weeks. The deadline to apply for this internship is on December 17th. So there's still time to apply, but the deadline is approaching. With that being said, I'd love to kind of hand the mic on over to our panelists today. And so with that being said, let's start with Grace. Can you introduce yourself and just tell us your name, your university program, your BPI year, and what projects that you worked on?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Grace Gilmore. I'm a second-year MBA student at the Yale School of Management, and I was a proud BPI class of 2021 this past summer with Dom, and I was based at Guadalupe Mountains National Park in far west Texas. I'm looking forward to talking more about that this evening.
Thanks, Grace. And then Dom, handing on over to you.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I was second what Grace said, and just super excited to be here and see you all and speak to you all about BPI. So Dominique Mosley, I'm a dual degree student, MBA and also a master's in environmental natural resources at Ohio State University, second year as well. I'm a part of the BPI 21 class. And last summer, I worked in the Region 1 in Cambridge, Massachusetts office.
Awesome. Thank you both for those introductions. Now we see what they did last summer. I'd love for you both to kind of take a step back and think back to when you were in these prospective candidates' shoes and think about what inspired you to apply and accept an offer for the NPS BPI program. Dom, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll definitely kick us off on this one. So I think a couple of reasons, but I think two really stick out to me. So just kind of have a purpose-driven internship to start with really appealed to me. So prior military experience, I'm very much a service-oriented individual. So thinking about how when I made that transition into more business-related roles, how can I still have some type of impact or service oriented with my career, BPI just really fit the bill with the National Park Service. And then secondly, I would just say the different the diversity of potential projects to work on. So I really wanted to be creative in whatever I was doing for the summer. So when you think about a lot of MBA roles, some of them can be quite cookie cutter. When I found out about NPS's BPI program, I just thought about how creative and how diverse the problem set would be and how cool it would be to be able to work on something like that.
Thank you for that thorough answer. And then Grace, how about you?
Sure, I would say a lot of what you were just sharing, Dom, echoes my memory and experience last year as well. I think similarly for me, I knew that I wanted to work with a mission-driven organization for my summer internship. And my background was actually in strategy consulting in the nonprofit sphere. And so I was sort of interested in nonprofit or public sector work, but I'd never been in the public sector. And so part of what really appealed to me about the NPS internship was actually the opportunity to explore what would federal service look like and see, was that going to be a good fit for me? I was also really interested in a role where on the one hand, I would really have opportunities to grow and learn and expand my skill set, and at the same time, be able to feel like I was really contributing something meaningful to the organization based upon my MBA studies and prior work experience that I'd had. And then finally, I'm sure many of you on the call have a deep love of the national parks, and I was thrilled at the thought of being able to spend part of my summer in a national park and actually get to have some work that was outside of a traditional office. And so that combination of those four for me was really compelling. And in terms of the second part of your question, Nicolette, around accepting the offer, I think all those things that I've been hoping for when I was applying, in the course of my conversations with folks, they were really ringing true. So I felt really confident about that. And every interaction that I had with folks, both from the Purposeful Growth Institute as well as NPS, was really positive and exciting. And so I felt good about it and was really looking forward to the summer. So there was no doubt in my mind at that point.
Awesome. It's really great to hear that you both have, such a positive experience in terms of why you got into it and also what you got out of it. And so, really honing in on the fact that, it's great, right, to be at a national park or to be at a regional office, just depending upon what your experience is. It's an opportunity that does stick out, right, when you speak to it. Not everybody gets to do that. And so obviously that's cool, but what about the impact? You both mentioned that. And so what does impact mean to you both? And yeah, let's start there. What essentially does impact mean to you? And so we start off with Dom. Grace, do you want to kick us off with this question?
Sure. I think that's a great question and a big question. And I'll sort of approach it in the context, I think, of NPS and the summer internship, if that's okay. The way that I sort of was thinking about it was on two levels. One was more like an org systems level, and one was more a personal level. So for me, at the org level, I really wanted to be doing work for an organization whose mission I really believed in and that I felt I could get behind. And I would be excited to get up and go to work every morning feeling like, yes, this is where I want to be and what I want to be committing 40 hours of my week to every week. And so for me, a lot of around the impact was that mission piece. I think on a personal level as well, there was more of a human component. So obviously, as I sort of mentioned before, I think part of how I think about impact too is, am I in a role where I think as a grad student, we bring a lot of unique skill sets and things that we've learned in the classroom, and could I be contributing that to an organization where I believed in the mission and thought that I could be helping bring that skill set in a meaningful way to help them be doing their work even better. So that was a piece of it as well. And then I was excited about the opportunity to both improve the visitor experience for folks who were coming to the park, but also for staff. And so some of those human relations and connections, and the fact that by helping improve the staff experience and their ability to do their work, that was also going to be freeing them up to do some of their important work as well around preserving and protecting the park and its natural resources. So for me, it was sort of a holistic, the broader organization level, but then also the people who I'd be working with and how could I make an impact in that area.
Yeah, I love to hear, Grace, that you were able to, you break down impact in terms of not just on an organizational making, tying it back to National Parks mission, but also the human aspect, which I think a lot of people aren't able to do with an internship. And is such a key thing that you both were able to do this summer. And so just bouncing now back off, what does impact mean to you, especially within the National Park Service, for you, Dom?
Yeah, Grace, that was excellent. I love how you brought up both personal and kind of an org level, and I was thinking of that in when Nicolette said, what is impact to you? And I thought specifically of, it's just bringing your full self. So your experiences, your perspective, your goals, your dreams, your desires, and your skill sets to an organization to meet a much larger and shared goal. So when I think of an impact, it's just how can I bring my best self to helping out an organization or a team achieve a shared goal that we can all get behind and move towards. And when I think of that specifically for my National Park Service project, impact to me was just simply how can I help my team or my client who may not have the business skill sets, how can I fill the gaps that they need to achieve the larger goals that they put forth for the region? So how can I place myself and bring my perspective, my experiences, and help complement some of the strengths that they already have so we can achieve our shared goal, which was the actual project.
I think you both gave really great insights into impact meaning more, right? Of just on an organizational level, but both of you guys had such a positive personal piece to that. And Dom, you talked a little bit about it in terms of, this notion that there are gaps in being able to see, as a leader and taking a step back, right, of what you have a real business problem and how are you able to, successfully bring your best self, which is hard to do. That's even hard to say out loud, right? To be able to even do that. Especially given the amount of autonomy, and you guys will be able to speak to this, that you guys receive within this internship. And I'd love to kind of start with you, Dom, in terms of just high level, what did your project entail?
Yeah, interesting project. Thanks for that question, Nicolette. So unlike, I think the vast majority of my peers or my cohort members, we were in an actual regional office in a nice city. I was set up in a nice apartment. Thank you, Nicolette, for setting it up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Great quality of life, right? But our project entailed, so Region 1, the National Park Service has, millions of collections items. And when you think of Region 1, which is the Northeast region, it is the vast majority of the parks and sites are historical sites. So think of battlefield sites like in Hampton in Virginia as well, and in Pennsylvania. So a lot of historical sites there, historical sites in Massachusetts as well. So many different items you have with these historical sites. John F. Kennedy's baptism gown, for example, a artillery round from Gettysburg, for example. All of these artifacts need to be housed somewhere. So what's happened is that Congress has asked National Park Service to develop a plan for housing all of its artifacts, its collections, because the vast majority of the collections are in subpar facilities. So what they were trying to do is how can we go about consolidating some of these collections? How would that impact the actual individual parks if some of that collections items were removed from the individual park and transported to a consolidated location? So our project was developing an operational model for what that would look like. How would it work? How much would it cost? And who would actually have to be running the actual program?
Thanks for that high level, Dom. And then Grace, what was your project?
Yes, I feel like we have a perfect counterpoint, Dom, since I was based in a park, so I can speak a little bit more to that. And I think it's, as Nicolette alluded to, a good sort of representation, because I think in our cohort, maybe about half, I guess, of folks were in parks, and then the other half were working for regional offices. So it's a good breakdown. So as I mentioned, I was based at Guadalupe Mountains National Park, which is in far west Texas. It's a beautiful park if you've never been. It's got the highest peak in Texas, which is about 8,700 feet. So definitely worth a visit if you find yourself in the area. And so I, along with my co-consultant, we were brought in to help the park think through their wilderness use permit program. So those are the permits that are required for any overnight backpacking trip at the park. And over the past 10 years or so, the park had been seeing increasing visitation to the park overall, but also to the for the backcountry permits. And so all of these permits were processed entirely by hand on like carbon copy slips of paper in the visitor center office. Couldn't do any advanced reservations. You needed to come during the morning beforehand if you're planning for a backpacking trip, and hopefully you could secure a spot at one of the campsites. So you can imagine for staff, as visitation is growing, and this is a rather laborious process, it was becoming a really increasing burden on staff time, but also challenging for visitors if they were coming halfway across the country and then would find that they didn't have a campsite for the night. So what we were brought in to do was help assess the current process and provide some recommendations around where it could be strengthened. So to do that, we sort of split our work into two phases. The first half was really trying to understand the current state and how things were working. So we did a lot of interviews with members of the staff across all the different divisions. We actually came in on a Saturday so we could observe the permit process a couple times, like flies on the wall, just watching how it actually worked and building out a process map. And then we talked to a lot of other parks, because as you can imagine, there are a lot of parks in the NPS who similarly have to issue backcountry permits, and to learn from them how they were evolving their processes, what was working, what wasn't working, and what we might be able to adapt for Guadalupe Mountains. So that was the first part of the work. We then ultimately recommended that the park move forward with shifting the permitting system to an online reservation model on recreation.gov, where folks could place a reservation in advance. But then what was important for the park was to retain some of that in-person interaction. So they would then still come and pick up their permit in person at the visitor center and have a conversation with the ranger. Because of that process of shifting it online, of course, there would have to be some sort of pricing component in order to pay for the fees of the recreation.gov system. So we did a little bit of pricing analysis as well, thinking through what would be an appropriate price that would cover those costs, but that might also generate a modest amount of revenue to help the park really maintain and improve the trail system that was 50 years old at that point. And then one of the last things we did at the end of the summer was, these were just our recommendations that we had developed in partnership with the staff. And so an important next step was we developed a press release and social media materials in partnership with the park to then launch a 45-day public comment period, where everything that I just shared with you, we put out in a press release where anyone across the country or the world really could comment upon this proposal that the park was putting forward and share their feedback that would then be incorporated into the proposal. So that was, in short, that was what my co-consultant and I were working on for 10 weeks. Happy to go into more detail for specific questions about different parts of that.
Awesome. Thank you both. It's very obvious that you made a huge impact, right? With super niche projects. Like super niche projects, very different, but are actually solving a real business problem. And so with that, I'd love to paint the picture for the audience of just, if you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, what would you say is the level of impact that you feel you brought during your summer at the NPS BPI program, given your projects?
Yeah, I'll hop in. I think, to be honest with you, I think we had a 9. And the reason why is because we really challenged assumptions. So for my project, there was a prior study to bringing us along. They had a vision already in mind in terms of how they wanted that consolidations process and model to look, what it would look like. But we challenged the assumptions associated with it, ran data behind it, and kind of stated, we're not sure if this plan that you had thought of is actually viable, and here's the reason why. So questioning the assumptions, then kind of challenge what they were doing and that thought processes. So moving forward, the roadmap that we developed is being pushed out across the country potentially now, in terms of these are the questions that need to be asked, the data that needs to be requested before we can actually develop a consolidation strategy across National Park Service as a whole. So kind of reorienting how they actually think about the problem. I would have to say, I think we have about a 9 in terms of our impact.
That's awesome. And then Grace, before you hop in, I'd love to just hear, Dom, given that you were pushing almost against a force, right? You're questioning assumptions. I'd love to just hear like the skills that taught you and how you were able to bring that into your second year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. A couple of skills that I would highlight, but just first and foremost, just change management, right? So sometimes we think that we really know the answer to something, but you have to recognize that you have to bring people along. When you want to lead, and if you consider yourself to be a leader, you have to have people who are going to actually follow you, right? So the change management piece, I think, is sometimes underestimated. So when you think of a plan, especially as a consultant coming in, for an external consultant coming in, you have to recognize that people have their own opinions. They're already, they have their ways of doing things, and there are barriers there. There are friction points. So you have to be able to communicate to them and bring them along in the process. So really think about, what does the customer need, and how can you backwards plan to meet those customers' needs and how can you bring along all of the different stakeholders within the process. So by far, that was the largest kind of takeaway for me from the summer. So when I came back into my second year of the program, and I think I may have spoken about this before with Nicolette, I'm a dual degree student, MBA in the business world, but also master's environmental natural resources, so science as well. So within my respective areas, I'm always the one that's bringing folks along for these shared conversations, right? So in the business school, hey, that's the tree hugger, Dom, right? But hey, let's talk about the importance of sustainability, and as that is the bedrock for actual economic growth, right? Within the environmental school, that's the capitalist, right? All right, let's talk about the importance of actual, financing and et cetera. So how can you go about actually bringing people along in this shared journey to achieve these shared goals?
Yeah, it's great to hear, your takeaway. I think that management piece and being able to, communicate with different stakeholders about different topics is so essential, especially for this group, especially as purpose-driven leaders, both that you are, and going into these spaces where you kind of are on the outside potentially looking in. And so it's great to hear that you gain that. And so Grace, kind of turning it to you in terms of what on the ranking scale, what level of impact do you feel like you had?
Sure. I just want to say first off, I really loved hearing what you were saying, Dom, about the change management piece. I think that definitely was a theme that came across in our project as well. So it's really powerful to hear you speak about that. I think I would say for our project, an 8, probably just because I like even numbers. I think something that really stuck with me on, it was maybe the last day in the park that I was speaking with one of the senior folks from the management team who we've been working with closely throughout the summer. And she said, we have been wanting to do this analysis for 5 years. We knew that it was an issue, we had identified it, and we literally hadn't had the staff capacity or time or bandwidth to sit down and dedicate the 800 hours that my co-consultant and I were able to bring over 10 weeks, 40-hour weeks, to run the analysis, do the interviews, talk to other parks, develop a recommendation, build a model, and submit it for a public comment period. And so the fact that we were able to come in and help partner with the park and bring an idea to life that they had been percolating for years, that felt really impactful to me, and really exciting that we were able to do that over the span of a summer. I think the only thing that keeps me from saying that it was a 10 is that we were obviously there only for 10 weeks. And so when we left midway in August, the public comment period was midway through. The 45 days obviously had not elapsed yet. And so we were leaving the project in the state where we're going to see what was going to happen with public comment and what would the park ultimately decide to submit to the regional office for approval or not. And so I do want to say that one thing that I think Dom and I haven't really touched upon yet is how intentional the business management group really is in selecting the project for BPI interns. And so one of the things that felt great about leaving when we were leaving the end of August was knowing that there was a great team within the park who was committed to seeing this through. The name of the person that we reported to in the park, his title for us was the project champion. And I think that's such an apt description of actually what he was doing. He really saw his role as obviously mentoring us and helping us do the work that we need to do, but really championing this project and making sure it was going to live on after we left. And similarly within the business management group, there's also a real emphasis on making sure that obviously the project is going to be useful and have a life within the park, but somewhat to what Don was saying as well, are there learnings from these individual BPI projects that can be scaled up and disseminated across NPS, either within a region or nationally, where many of the parks are experiencing similar challenges or opportunities. And so how can we share those learnings? And so I think that's something that I really appreciated about the summer, about how intentional the program was in structuring the projects and in who was going to be championing them across the different parks or regional offices.
Thanks so much for your response, Grace. Really well said, and that echoing the fact that the proposals for the projects are really thought out in terms of the BMG team. It's actually a really competitive process. And so we, from the national park side, they are partners of ours, but they really do try to be intentional in terms of what are the projects and then also the individuals that get pitched onto the projects. It is 2 consultants within on each project, but it's supposed to be where perfect match almost. And obviously these 2 can explain more as you guys will leave time for you guys to ask them questions, but essentially what that co-consultant relationship was like in terms of the amount of autonomy that they received, and how much you both had to rely on each other. Well, they weren't co-consultants together, but their other consultant. And so as we kind of wrap up in terms of the questions that I have, it's more like final words of wisdom. So what advice or final words would you share with interested NPS BPI applicants who desire to make a positive impact with their summer?
I can start off with that one. So I think one of the thoughts that I have is actually circling back to the question you asked earlier, Nicolette, about impact. I think that's a really powerful question. And if that's a goal that you have for your summer internship, may it be MBA or otherwise, I think that can be a really useful screen as you're considering opportunities and say, is this a role where I think I really could make a positive impact and contribute in this work? And not only is it an internship that says that that can be done, but actually does it look like there's the support system and structures in place where folks who you've spoken to actually were able to do something really impactful with their work. And for me, the NPS and the BPI internship was that. So I think it can be a helpful screen as you're assessing different opportunities for your summer. And the other thing that I would say is everyone that I interacted with this summer in the National Park Service loved the work and were really proud of the mission and the organization that they were serving. And I would say, let your love and excitement for the Park Service and outdoors, whatever it may be, shine through in your application. I think it's a common theme and thread, and don't feel like you need to couch that in any way. I'd say definitely let it shine through.
Yeah, to echo some of Grace's word, I think the first thing that comes to me is just know yourself, right? So really do the homework on what you want, what are you looking for out of your internship experiences, and what skills you bring. So really understanding what some of your motivations are, it will come across in the application. It's a very competitive process, as Nicolette can tell you. If you really know what your motivations are, I think you can do a much better job of communicating why you're such a good fit for the BPI program. And then secondly, with knowing yourself, take a step back and recognize that this is an impact-oriented internship. While you may see a glamorous picture of Yosemite, for example, you have to recognize that you may be placed in a place that is just as beautiful, but it's not Yosemite, for example, right? So really, if you want to go into it, really think about the actual impact that you'll be making and the mission of the National Park Service, and not necessarily think about one specific part that you would love to spend the summer in. Because I can tell you, no matter what project you're on, if no matter where you are in the country, I really think that you would enjoy it and you would take a lot away from it. But just recognize that I really want to go into this because I want to have an impactful experience, so to say. So I think that's my largest takeaway for anyone who's thinking about applying to the BPI program.
Well, guys, you heard it from them. Ultimate Gems just dropped. I think both of these individuals, they shine through in terms of them wanting to make an impact. I think that's such a huge theme throughout this conversation that's been said and that's been shared. I think as you guys kind of echoing the messages that have already been said by Grace and Dom, and that as you guys apply, really put your best foot forward in who you are. PGI works with the National Park Service because they are mission aligned. They want purpose-driven leaders. They want individuals that are going to question what's being said, but do it in a delivery stance of what makes sense and what's going to benefit the actual park. We want individuals, highlight your experience, given that the fact that you love being at a national park. We want to hear those things. We want to hear how you make that personal connection. And let's say you haven't had that, but you are still looking to make an impact, say that and share those things. And so those are kind of just from my perspective. I'm a little bit biased, obviously. We want you all to apply, but really it kind of gets outdated saying, be your best self, right? But essentially really showcase who you are is really what we want you all to do. And so with that, I know it's 5:30. I'd love to a lot of things were said, and I'm sure there's a big group of us. And so I'd love to take the time to open up the space for the audience to ask any questions to our panelists. And so if you guys do have a question within the audience, please don't be shy. Definitely raise your hand. I'll call on you and then you can unmute yourself. And so I'm just scanning to ensure. Definitely. Oh, I see a raised hand. Morgan.
Hey, thank you all for talking to us. I'm so excited to apply this program. I just can't even stand it. I wanted to talk to you, Grace. I went to Guadalupe this summer, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that program that you instituted. I was sort of interested in you talking about how recreation.gov, there's fees to use recreation.gov. And I just was wondering, does recreation.gov, is that owned by the NPS? Is that owned by the US government in a different way? Does the National Park Service have to pay them to use recreation.gov? I wanted a little more information about how that interaction works.
Sure, that's a great question, and definitely something, oh gosh, we spent weeks getting into the weeds of understanding how recreation.gov works. I will spare you all of that detail. But what I will say is recreation.gov is a partner of the National Park Service. You'll probably notice on recreation.gov that there are Forest Service sites and other sort of Department of Interior agencies as well who are sometimes using recreation.gov. It's not every park that's using it, for example, but there is sort of a groundswell and a movement towards recreation.gov that you probably have experienced, and just as you did at Guadalupe Mountains. In terms of how the pricing works, there essentially is a fee that is charged by recreation.gov for hosting the service for every transaction that happens. And so that fee is priced differently depending upon if someone wants to call in and use the call center to make a reservation versus if they're using the website, and depending upon the type of reservation, there are different fees. So part of what we needed to think through with the park was to make sure that they were not going to be incurring a loss by shifting to recreation.gov. So how could we cover those costs while providing this service for folks to be able to use it? And then think through separately, did it make sense to generate a small amount of revenue to really be able to support and improve the visitor experience and make sure that the trails infrastructure was there to support folks who were coming and making those reservations and staying at the backcountry sites. So much more detail there, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense.
That's super helpful. Thank you. It's on that site, you're like, there's the National Park Service, there's forest lands. It's a really odd site both to navigate and what's on it. I think is fascinating. So thank you for talking about that.
Sure.
Awesome. And then I see Peter has his hand raised, and then Morris, we can go to you next.
Thanks so much. What brings me here actually is kind of more of a specific interest in the national parks, but I have more of a background in real estate, and am trying to figure out ways that where I can marry real estate with areas of social impact, and the public service is kind of one route that I'm looking at. And I guess my question is, it seems that the internship program is pretty broad, in that you don't know exactly what sort of office you'll be in or where you'll be, or what sort of projects you'd be working on. But is there one? I guess, is there an opportunity, given kind of this aspect of real estate and land management potentially, where there is a potential place for that? And if there's not an answer to that you might know off the top of your head, just this aspect of, I guess, having any kind of ability to kind of maybe steer towards one particular type of project, or how that allocation happens. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I can take this one actually. So there is a place for it in National Park Service. So first we have to recognize that the process by which different parks propose out projects to BMG, that's different, separate. BMG actually has to accept that. But when I think about real estate in particular, we've had examples from the past within Region 1 where BPI would come on, and you have business services or commercial services within each park. So think of a random park and different businesses who come in to provide a service. For example, kayaking in a park, for example, or if there's an actual a historical site in a park, they can rent that out for concessions. So I've actually seen projects done in the past where they've done real estate valuations on particular national historical sites or buildings within a park, non-historic buildings within a park, and then kind of doing the valuation in terms of, okay, if we rent this out, how much can this national park earn in revenue? Or is it worth just kind of bulldozing it down? How much in services do we need to put towards this building? So there are projects that I've actually seen where real estate was one of the primary I guess deliverables, of real estate prices were one of the primary deliverables. I'll give you an add-on to that one. So for my project, we were initially asked to provide the total cost of ownership of an actual facility. About halfway in, they recognized that, okay, we don't need total cost of ownership, we just want operating costs. So before that, though, we were looking at CapEx, right? So capital expenditures. Where do you want to place a potential consolidation facility? Well, we have to take into real estate prices, right? So at that point, we were looking at, all right, what's the difference between putting a 40 square foot, 1,000 square foot building in Boston, Massachusetts versus Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right? Is there much of a difference? So that's just an example of, the projects do vary, but I've personally seen within the Northeast region that prior projects included real estate kind of components to it. So I think that's clearly a place for that. I can guarantee that would be your actual project.
Awesome, thank you.
And I'll maybe jump in. I'm so glad you jumped in because you know way more about real estate projects than I experienced this summer, but I can maybe speak a little bit to how the actual process assignment works. So at the point at which, and maybe it was different for you, Dom, but when I accepted the offer, I think I had in conversations understood there was a list of maybe like 12 to 15 projects. There was like a short list at that point of like, here's some contenders. We're not sure what the final list is, but here's a representative sample of the kinds of projects you might be working on this summer. I accepted in that context. And then about 2 months later, I think it was closer to April or so, we got these fantastic one-pagers that the BMG team and each of the parks or regional offices had prepared that summarized the problem statement, some of the context for that particular project and what they were envisioning some of the main analyses or what the work would entail. And so we went through, read each of those one-pagers. At that point, there were 9 of them because there were going to be 9 projects in detail, and then ranked for each of those 9 our sort of preferences and interests across the projects. And then for the top ones where you were really interested, we were asked to write up a short blurb, both about what were the skills that you thought you would bring, both from your academic and professional experience that would really help you contribute to that particular project. And on the flip side, which I thought was great, what are some of the things that you're learning, hoping to learn or grow, and how would this project help you do that? And how can we sort of try to marry those two? And then some questions as well about sort of how your working style, some of your preferences in that area, to think about who could be a good co-consultant, where both your working styles, but also the experiences that you each bring would be a really good match to that particular project and help the regional or park staff team really tackle that work. So that was another opportunity as well to sort of provide your input on where you were hoping, at least within a rank order, that you might be for the summer.
Awesome, thank you, really helpful.
Awesome. And then Morris, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with us today, guys. I just kind of wanted to double click on the actual experience side of things. Can both you, Grace, and Dominique kind of talk to some of the more impactful relationships that you developed over the summer and kind of like what they meant for not only just your experience this summer, but like kind of how you want to grow and develop as a professional beyond?
I think it's a great question. I'll sort of jump in and then turn it over to you, Dom. So I think one of the things that I really enjoyed was that, as I mentioned, I was actually living in the park. And so that meant that I was living in park housing, and at Guadalupe Mountains National Park in particular, about half of the staff live in the park, and then the other half live somewhere nearby, many in a community about an hour away in New Mexico. And so I actually got to really know members of the park staff and community, not only working during the day, but also in social activities and potlucks and things in basically the little community center that was there within park housing, walks in the evening, people, as the sun would go down and the temperatures would cool down. Many of the park staff would take walks out with their family or their dogs. And so there was that really nice opportunity to get to know other folks in the park, not just professionally, but on a personal level as well, and learn about what's it been like having a career in the Park Service. Some of the folks had worked at Guadalupe Mountains for nearly 30 years, and others had been at many other parks and had just arrived recently. And so got a real sense of the variety of different careers within the Park Service. I think on something else that somewhat speaks to your question as well that I really appreciated was the real focus on development and professional development and growth. So we were assigned small sort of teams of other BPI interns over the course of the summer. And we would meet about once a week with 2 others and really talk about what are you learning on your project? What are some of the challenges, questions that you have? How can we support each other with what might be useful from our park context? And then also meetings with our business management group project supervisor, who was in our case a fantastic resource, both someone about what's it like to work in the Park Service within the business management group, but then also providing really helpful feedback both at the midpoint and at the end of the summer around strengths that they saw in our work, but also areas for improvement and growth. And so that was something that I hadn't fully appreciated, the extent to which there was going to be real emphasis on training and development and growing your skill sets in service to doing the work even better over the course of the summer. I don't know what you would add, Dom, and hopefully that responds to your question a little bit, Morris.
Yeah, Morris, that's a great question. Grace, I'll add a couple different points. You hit a lot of them. So co-consultant is the number one that I want to speak on. So you're all placed with a co-consultant, another BPIer that you'll be working with and likely living with. This is just a completely different dynamic in terms of how do I navigate this relationship where I'm professionally working with someone. We're bouncing ideas off of each other. We're vibing some days, maybe not vibing other days, but I also need to sleep, a couple of feet, a few feet away from him or her as well, right? So like, how do you navigate and switch that off, right? And that's become, increasingly, I would say, an advantageous skill to have, right? Because a lot of us are working from home nowadays, right? And you may spend a lot more time working from your home office, for example, than you would prior to in the actual office or at a field site. So how do you navigate the relationship between working and living with someone in your actual, living space? So that relationship really blossomed for me. I got really lucky with my co-consultant, Michael, and we developed a friendship that lasted to the day. I just received a package from him this week of some new spices that him and his fiance wanted to send me from California. So being able to bounce ideas off of him, and we had such different strengths that we were able to complement each other well. So how do you recognize each other, your weakness, and how to be, I would say, a little bit vulnerable in recognizing I'm not strong in this area. Can you help me out in this? So that's, I would say, the top relationship that I was able to establish and kind of just cherish moving forward. But then secondly, I would highlight and being in parks are great. I was in Cambridge and Boston. I actually really took advantage of that, to be honest with you. So Boston's a great city. I did a lot of networking when I was in Boston to try to figure out some potential career moves post-graduation. So just taking advantage of that. And whenever I said, hey, I'm working with BMG at National Park Service, that was like the entry line for everything. And everyone goes there, oh man, you're a business student and you working at National Park Service, that's pretty cool. I'll talk to you, right? So that was always my entry line, like, hey, I'm interning here, with National Park Service. People were so willing to speak with me after that point. So co-consultant and then just kind of networking while I was in an actual metropolis.
Super cool. Thank you both for sharing. Not so sure I agree with you that Boston's that cool, but thank you anyway.
I don't know if Grace will appreciate that. She's a Northeasterner.
Yeah, I also lived in Boston for 7 years. But one other thing that I want to add to follow up on what you were saying, Dominic, too, about some of the networking is you're also joining a network of other BPI alums that's really deep. The program has been running for 20 plus years now. And so even over the course of the summer, there were lots of opportunities, including some facilitated by Nicolette, to get to talk to other BPI alums who are in the Park Service and who are doing really interesting work in different parks or regional offices. And you're joining a cohort of 20 or so other folks over the course of your summer. And so something that our cohort did, because we obviously were split across the country, is we had started by the team who was in Alaska. They sent around a little stuffed salmon named Sammy, and it traveled over the course of the summer to each of the different project sites. And the box would appear, and there would be some little token or stickers or something, postcards from that different project and that team. And it was a really nice way to feel like we were still connected, even if we were only seeing each other on Zoom squares during our conversation. So there's something really to be said for the power of that network and other folks who are doing the same internship and share many of those same values and interests and passion because they're part of the BPI for the summer.
Yeah, great. Thanks again.
Awesome. And then we're going to get to Donald, but one thing I actually just want to hit on here as you guys approach this application and thinking about the relationship components and thinking about your skills is really to hit on also your interpersonal skills and how you can communicate. Those are the types of skills that really make strong BPI consultants. Yes, a part of the project is to dive into the data and be able to articulate and storytell. But another really big piece of this puzzle is how you are able to communicate, how you're able to navigate and network with other individuals. You guys heard it from these panelists. You guys are coming in as external consultants. So like you're living with the park people who have been there every single day, who have been there 30 plus years and things of that nature. And you need to talk to them and hear what their experience was like, so that, you know, that goes back into your data analysis. And so really just honing in on those skills as well for all those that are applying really will get you far within this application cycle. And then yes, Donald.
Thanks. Yeah, just to echo, thank you guys so much. I was wondering how your internships have affected or changed your perspective on what you want to do after graduation.
I'm laughing. It's a $1 million question. It feels like for a second year student at this point. I could say, so one of the things that, as I mentioned earlier, that I was sort of hoping to test over the course of the summer was working in federal government. I had worked in the private sector and I had worked in the nonprofit sector, but I hadn't worked in the public sector. And that was something that I was curious about. And the Park Service and the BPI internship was a great foray into that. And I would say after 10 weeks plus a week of training, so 11 weeks, I absolutely loved it. I felt it was a really great fit for me, a real mix of bringing a skill set that I feel like can contribute and really doing mission-driven work. And so I'm still in an exploration phase, but I think it was a really helpful input and eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, for me, I think a couple of things, but first and foremost, I think it validated just kind of my just principles in terms of what do I want to get out of a career or what do I want to pursue. So making that transition into the MBA, coming from the military, you recognize that, okay, sometimes you think, all right, I'll just go into CPMG, right? I will go into brand management or something like that. This gave me the exposure to recognize there are so many different options out there for you, as an MBA student, right? You can go into, private sector, public sector, nonprofit. However, within all three, you can find a purpose-driven career path within it. So I think for me, it was just validation in terms of, hey, I'm not sure if I want to go public, private, nonprofit, but I do know whatever it is, I kind of want to have some impact with my career path. And then secondly, I did recognize that I really enjoy consulting, to be honest with you. So, over this semester and then going into next semester, I'm on multiple consulting projects because I recognize it as something that I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the challenge. And it's also something I just really want to get better at. When I brought up the change management piece, I really recognize the importance of being able to communicate, persuade, and bring people along. So I really enjoyed that. And now that's something that I just always want to do now. How do I get better at storytelling? How do I get better at reaching individuals and where they are and bringing them along in this shared journey for a shared goal?
That's great. Thanks so much.
Awesome. And before we I'll call on you, Morgan, I also just wanted to add on to this in terms of, you guys are first year MBA students or graduate students, and you're thinking about your career. Just wanted to share the types of outcomes, at least that we've seen, given that we have been running this program for a couple of years. One, this program really is a feeder back into the National Park Service. A lot of people want to come back. And the really cool thing too is that if you successfully complete this program, you do become eligible, called direct hire eligible, where you are able to bypass certain, the public sector, certain I forget what it's called essentially, but essentially you bypass a lot of those things and move through. So any job within USA Jobs, you bypass a lot of those stipulations. And so one, you can also go into consulting. We have seen a lot of individuals go back into consulting, given this is a consulting project, and then also come back to the National Park Service. And the also really cool thing is that you do have 2 years from the completion of your summer where you can actually come back. So let's say you complete the program and you're like, oh, I actually want to try something else. That's completely fine. You can go do that and come back within 2 years and you're still direct hire eligible. So just wanted to share that out loud for those of you guys thinking. I know it's a thought, right, where you want to go in your career. So just kind of putting that out there. And then Morgan, would love to hear your question.
Real quick, and Nicolette, that's a great point about the 2-year piece, because it's not 2 years after you complete the internship. It's actually 2 years from graduation. So for me, for example, dual degree student, I don't graduate until 23. My 2 years doesn't start until 23. So great point, Nicolette, bringing that up.
Yes, thanks. Yes, from graduation. And Morgan, go ahead.
That's kind of a nice segue into my question. So my background, I was doing a lot of work as a consultant for federal agencies. And I know one of the things that I experienced a lot of was just with big agencies, there can be a lot of red tape sometimes. There can be issues with access to different systems or different data. So I'm curious to hear if that was something that you guys experienced as well, or to what extent you maybe like ran up against those challenges of working with an agency.
Grace, I'll take a quick stab to
Okay.
start, to be honest with you. So first, I would say the constraints working with government was actually one of the selling points for me in terms of consulting, right? Because I think a lot of times if you go into a consulting role and you have to operate within so many different constraints, I think it forces you to develop a far more creative solution. You can't just throw money at it. You can't just throw more resources at it, right? You can't just fire a bunch of people. You actually have to develop a very unique plan to meet those unique needs, right? So in our situation, we came across all of them, to be honest with you. And first and foremost within National Park Service is just resources, right? So this is easy to Google, right? National Park Service is, underfunded in comparison to, what it should be, could be, right? So a lot of the challenges that parks face is, a lack of, resources, a lack of people, for example. So for us, when we were kind of developing this plan in terms of who should be caring for collections, where collections should be going, we always ran up against, hey, we barely have enough people, to be able to greet folks when they come to our National Historic Site. We don't have enough people to actually care for these collections, right? We checked on these collections once every 7 months. We don't have the ability to come and put in the time to check on these things at a more routine or regular intervals, for example. So the resource constraints, first and foremost. Then I'll give you a very unique point, regulatory, right? So one of the challenges we're facing as a National Park Service is that we have poor storage facilities, right? But we're still sessioning a bunch of stuff. It's almost like we made a joke in BMG. It was like, hey, am I watching an episode of Hoarders right now? And the reason why is because, if an archaeologist, dig something out the ground, all of that, it has to be, for the most part, it has to be a session, right? And the deaccessioning process is very difficult. So, for example, if there was a historic site, hey, this is a beautiful home that was built in 1774, right? Some parks have said we'll keep all 100 bricks of the base foundation of this home, right? And you say, hey, I don't think you need all 100 bricks. I think you just need 2 bricks, right? You can just get rid of the other ones, right? The process by which you need to get rid of those 98 bricks are so burdensome that it's nearly impossible to get rid of them, right? So like those are some of the regulatory constraints where you can't just say, even if you, Morgan, you're the superintendent of Olmsted House, right? You can't just say, hey, we don't need those 98 bricks. You have to actually go up a chain of command, pretty high up, and it goes through a very deliberate process. And there's a reason for that, obviously, but with that, it's just very cumbersome. So within my project specifically, I saw resource constraints, I saw regulatory constraints. So when you're taking that into account, you say, all right, how can we go about doing this? So we recognize that deaccessioning isn't a viable option. I can't just recommend you all to just deaccession 50% of your collections. I need to take that into account when building out this different model, right? I know I just can't tell you guys to hire 10 more people at each park, right? I need to figure out a way where you can just operate these collections more efficiently with less people, which maybe that just means a larger consolidated facility where you can have dedicated staff there that's assigned there who can take care of a far larger amount of collections and not have to do collections care at individual parks because you don't have the personnel to do it at individual parks. So when you think about those constraints, to me, it's just more of a challenge. I need to just be super creative with design thinking and saying, what solution can I make with all of these constraints? I hope that answers a little bit of the question.
Yeah, and I mean, that was great, Dom. And I was literally going to say something very similar about regulatory constraints and design thinking. I think in the context of our project, part of what a lot of time that we spend getting up to speed on was understanding the regulations and authorities that govern how parks can charge fees. There's a really, really complex body of regulations from Congress and from NPS around the different types of fees that you can charge for. And on the user side, it might all look the same, but on the back end, they're actually very different discrete types of fees. And then what are the processes for instituting those, for making changes, and for actually repealing them? And so when we were working through different ideas for what a possible pricing structure and reservation system could look like, there were some ideas that we had that we were super excited about, trying to pull in some of the MBA knowledge we had about optimal pricing and things. And then we would go and look at the regulations and authorities and turns out, oh, we actually can't do that. It's not structured that way. We're not allowed to charge in that manner. So we'd have to come back to the drawing board. And at first it was a little frustrating because we thought we'd spend all this time talking to folks. We had this really exciting idea of like, this is gonna be it. This is gonna solve all the problems. And then similar to what Dom said, it actually then forced us to be much more creative and say, okay, we can't do it this way, but how can the principle and the spirit of what we thought was going to address the issue, how can we still retain that, but do it within a way that with respects and is within the regulations and authorities. So that was certainly one part of it. And I think another piece as well for us was around process. So maybe traditionally, if you're in the private sector and you're thinking about pricing, you might do focus groups. We were not allowed, given some of the constraints around talking to visitors in the public. We couldn't just sit out front and sit from the visitor center and conduct a focus group with visitors. So it meant that we had to collect our data in a different way, be creative, thinking about different data sources. What could we learn from some of the comments on, say, the park's Instagram posts, where people were providing feedback about the proposals that we were putting out there, and how could we approach it from a different angle? And so again, it forced us to be more creative, and we actually found ourselves referring a fair amount to some of the principles that we learned from a human-centered design workshop that the NPS actually had a government agency and team who, for the federal government, all they specialize in is human-centered design and helping different government agencies think through how to employ those principles in their work. And so during that first training week, we had a whole day session with all of us from the BPI, the BMG, and each of our project champions across the different parks and regional offices doing, working through a human-centered design challenge. And so we were able to pull a lot of that in. It sounds like similar to Dom as well, into some of the work that we were doing.
Awesome. So we are coming close. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I thought I saw someone on mute. But essentially, we are coming close to the hour. I really want to give a big shout out to our panelists today for really coming and speaking to us about your perspectives and sharing your experiences. And then I want to give a shout out to the audience for coming to attend. The deadline, like I stated, is December 17th to apply. It is a resume drop along with answering a few short response questions. And I just think big key takeaways from this session, I hope you all gained, is that if you're looking for an internship opportunity where you're trying to make an impact and you care about America's national parks and you really want to make a difference, this is definitely an opportunity to do so. And so be your authentic self and, you know, really put all you can within your application as you go through it. And so I see, Dom, you have your hand raised. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, real quick. So obviously, like Nicolette said, you're going to make a difference. You're going to learn a lot, challenge yourself, likely be in a cool place. But just to keep it really light, if you do this program, you're going to walk away with such random knowledge of something. Did you just hear Grace like talk about pricing within the National Park Service? So like so much interesting things, right? And I'm talking about JFK's baptism gown. So when you think about just a very unique experience, it really just doesn't get any better than that. So I wanted to end it, just kind of keep it light. It's some really cool experience that you can gain here.
I would completely second that. And, you know, something that someone told me when I was applying was, no one's going to have a cooler summer internship than that. And it was so true when I came back in the fall and people heard, you were doing like a consulting project for the National Park Service, living in a national park. What? Like, I didn't know that was an MBA internship. I'm so jealous. I'm really excited. And it's a fantastic summer opportunity and a great community to join.
Well, you guys heard it. I think that's a great way to end it. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day, night, or morning, potentially wherever you are. We really look forward to hearing from y'all. So enjoy. Thanks so much for coming out. Bye, guys.